Welcome to World Talk Brief. 1,500. We're going to start with just that number. It's at the very heart of what we're talking about today because it represents something pretty unusual, something that's raising some big questions in the United States about power, protest, and, well, the role of the military itself. So what's behind this number? Well, it means that 1,500 active duty U.S. soldiers are on standby, ready to potentially be deployed to Minneapolis. Now, let's be really clear here. These aren't your local reserves or the National Guard. We're talking about soldiers from the 11th Airborne Division, all the way up in Fort Wainwright, Alaska, just waiting for a possible order from the president to operate inside an American city.
Okay, so how did we get to this point? I mean, why is such an extraordinary step like using active duty troops even on the table for a city in the U.S.? The whole story really starts with a flashpoint of citizen protest.
The immediate trigger for all of this was a series of pretty big demonstrations against this federal agency, ICE. It all came after a period of what's being called widespread ICE activity in Minneapolis, and you could just feel the tension between the community and federal agents hitting a boiling point. Let's just walk through the timeline. So in early January, you've got these reports of more and more ICE operations, and it's putting the whole city on edge. Then on January 7th, something happens that changes everything. A U.S. citizen named Renee Good is shot and killed by an ICE agent. That was it. That was the moment. Her death was the catalyst that just ignited protests, not only in Minneapolis, but all over the country. But, to really get why this set off such a firestorm, you have to understand who Renee Good was. And honestly, the answer to that question, it completely depends on who you're asking. And this is where the whole conflict gets incredibly polarized. You've got two totally different stories emerging. So on one side, you have protesters and city leaders. They describe Renee Good as a legal observer. That's someone who goes to a protest specifically to document what law enforcement is doing. Kind of like a nonviolent witness making sure civil rights are being respected. But then on the other side, the Trump administration has labeled her a domestic terrorist. I mean, you can't get more different than that. This complete, stark contrast is what's fueling these demonstrations. It's why you see signs everywhere saying justice for Renee. And what's so fascinating is how this isn't just happening on the streets. This response is unfolding at every single level of government. You've got the citizens protesting, you have the state mobilizing its National Guard, you have the federal court stepping in, and then all the way at the top, the White House putting the active duty military on alert. And this is a really crucial point. The judicial system got directly involved. A U.S. federal judge, Catherine Menendez, she issued a very specific order. It put legal limits on how federal agents could respond to the protests, and it explicitly protected peaceful observers and monitors, which of course goes right to the heart of the debate over what Renee Good was doing there. So you can see how this situation just snowballs from a local crisis into a much, much bigger national conversation about power, about precedent, and really about the limits of presidential authority. And that gets us to the fundamental question that makes what's happening in Minneapolis so important. Using active duty troops for law enforcement inside the U.S. is something that's traditionally a huge no-no. But there is a very specific historical law that allows for exceptions. That exception, it's called the Insurrection Act, and it's a law that's been on the books since way back in 1807. It basically gives the president the authority to deploy the military inside the U.S. to handle civil disorder or rebellion. But using it is incredibly rare and always controversial because it blurs that very important line between the military and domestic police. Now, let's be perfectly clear. No deployment order has been given. Those 1,500 soldiers are still in Alaska. But the fact that this option is even on the table, that's the story. It signals just how deep the tension is right now. It shows how fast a local conflict between citizens and federal agents can escalate into a national debate over one of the most sensitive issues in American democracy. And all of this leaves us with a really critical question, one for all of us to think about. How does a society strike that balance between the need for public order and the fundamental right of its people to protest the actions of their own government? There's no easy answer to that, and it's a question that is being tested in real time.